Hello and welcome to another episode of Cards Unbarred. My name's Ryan, and in this video, I'm going to teach you the 2 to 4 player card game, Eternal Decks, designed by Hirokin. The components in Eternal Decks consists of 24 Eternals, 128 Eternal cards, which includes 8 cards of 16 decks, 40 cards that make up the random deck, 9 purple star cards, 4 river rare cards, 2 game over cards, 20 starting cards, 4 decks that have 5 cards each, 1 egg card, 2 key bonus cards, 16 field cards, 16 puzzle cards, 16 task cards, and 16 gatekeeper cards. The game also comes with 8 communication discs, 2 gatekeeper discs, 4 keys, 3 hearts, 12 jewels, 6 stars, 1 d4, 2 ability aid cards, 4 player aid cards, and 10 stage cards. And finally, the game also comes with 1 game board. One thing to keep in mind, all of the components you will see in this video are from a pre-production copy, so the final version may look a little different than what you see here. Be sure to check the Kickstarter page or the Board Game Geek page for more information. All of the components that you're looking at right now are for the entire system of Eternal Decks. However, depending on the stage you're playing, you may not be using most of the components. So in this video, we're going to be going over the main how to play as well as stage A. So any components that are not used for stage A will be returned back to the box. If you want to see the rules for stage B, C, D, E, or F, please see those videos. Before we start setting up the board for stage A, I want to just go over the layout of the game board itself so you have a better understanding of the different areas on the game board. We'll just start at the top left and work our way down to the bottom right. The top part of the board has 9 spaces. This is known as the revival area. 1 row below that to the left is the jewel area. Directly to that right is the stage card area. Moving down to the middle of the game board, you have the 3 rows, which are known as the field. There's the top row, the middle row, and the bottom row. To the left of the 3 rows in the field, you have the field card area for the top row, middle row, and bottom row. And all the way at the end of that row, there's the 4th lap bonus area for the top row, middle row, and bottom row. And finally, we have the river, as well as the river bonus area and the discard area. To set up for stage A, the first thing you'll want to do is create the 9 Eternal decks. To do that, you'll want to locate the 9 Eternals, A1 to A3, B1 to B3, and C1 to C3. So as you can see on the screen now, the A1 is the Phoenix. You'll see all this information in the top right-hand corner of the Eternal card. And you will also want to grab the 8 Eternal cards for their Eternal deck. These cards will have the matching icons of that Eternal on the back of the card. So take the 8 cards from the Phoenix deck, shuffle them together, and place them in the top row of the field on the 5th space from the left. Then place the Phoenix Eternal face down on top of those 8 cards. The face down side of the card is with the purple background and the black coloring of the Eternal. The more colorful side is the face up side. You'll follow those steps with the A2 Mermaid and the A3 King, shuffling their 8 card Eternal deck, placing it in the top row of the field, and placing the Eternal card on top of those 8 cards face down. Complete those same steps for the B and C Eternals by placing the B Eternals in the middle row and the C Eternals in the bottom row. It will look something like this once it is all completed. Next, place the 6 stars in the depicted area across the board. There are 3 up in the revival area, 1 in the jewel area, 1 in the stage A area, and 1 in the 4th lap bonus area on the bottom row. Then place the 8 jewels in the jewel area. The other 4 jewels that come with the game can be returned back to the box as you will not use them in stage A. Next, place the 3 field cards in the field card area. The mountain will go in the top row, the cave will go in the middle row, and the camp will go in the bottom row. Place the additional camp field card in the top row of the 4th lap bonus area. All other field cards can be returned back to the box as they will not be used in stage A. Moving to the bottom of the board, we're going to set up the river bonus area by first placing a game over card there. Then take 3 of the river rare cards and place them on top of the game over card, splaying them a little bit so it fills up the river bonus area. This way it makes it easier for all players to see how many river rare cards there are throughout the game. Now each stage does come with stage cards that will be placed in this middle part of the game board. However, for stage A, it's already printed on the board. The game does come with the cards, so if you wanted to place them on the board, you can. But for stage A, it's already printed on the board, so there's nothing you need to do for that. Other stages, you will have to overlay those cards on top of there. Next, give each player a player aid card, and place the ability aid cards nearby. And place the 3 hearts in the middle row of the 4th lap bonus area. Moving to player setup, each player will pick one of the 4 starting colors, blue, red, yellow, or green, and sit around the table with the matching color in the corner of the board. Then they will take the 5 starting cards that match that player color, as well as the 2 communication discs of that color. From the 5 starting cards, each player will shuffle those 5 cards and draw 3 of them, leaving 2 of them face down on the table in front of them, creating what is known as their player deck. The 3 cards that are in the player's hands should be kept secret from all other players. There will be ways to indirectly communicate the information about the cards in your hand using the communication discs, but I'll explain those during gameplay. The last thing you need to do is select a starting player. This can be determined randomly, or players can use their communication discs to determine who they think would be the best starting player. However, let's get into the gameplay to be able to explain that in further detail. Eternal Decks is a cooperative card game where players are trying to complete their objective based on the stage they are playing. In Stage A, you need to gain 4 of the 6 stars to win. However, players can lose the game if on a player's turn they cannot perform one of the 3 actions, or you need to draw one of the river rare cards and there are none left to draw, and you instead draw the game over card. Now that we know how to win and lose, let's talk about what to do on your turn. When it's your turn, you must take one of the following 3 actions. The first action is play a card. When you play a card, it will come from one of the 3 cards that's in your hand, and you can either play it to one of the 3 rows on the field, into the river, or use an ability card. At the beginning of the game, we don't have any ability cards, so I'll go over those a little bit later. But right now, we could play a card to the field or the river. So looking at my hand, I have a 1, 3, and 4. And since I'm the green color, I would be playing one of the green cards. When playing a card into the field, there are common placement rules as well as field card rules that you must adhere to. The common rules apply to all 3 rows for the entire stage. These are cards of the same color may not be adjacent to each other. So something like this would not be allowed since these are the same color. Additionally, the same number cannot be next to each other. So if we had placed a 1, the next card cannot be a 1. Even though they're different colors, it's still the same number, so this would not be allowed. Again, this applies to all 3 rows in the field. Additionally, there are field card rules that apply to the specific row that field card is in. So the top row has mountain, which is ascending numbers. So the first card you can play is a 1 or any number, but the next card has to be higher than the card that was previously played. Again, following the common placement rules, we can't have a green card here or a 1, but something like this blue 2 would be allowed because it's ascending from the previous one and it's a different color and different number. The middle row is cave, which just means descending numbers. And the camp is actually one of the best cards. That one doesn't have any additional restrictions. Only the common restrictions of same number, same color next to each other apply. So you can play anything as long as it follows those common placement rules. So something like that would be allowed. Doesn't matter about going up or down. But let's just clear these cards off. So that's playing into the field. You can also play into the river on your turn, the 5 area down here. When you play into the river, there are no placement rules. It does not matter what card you can play anything you want. There's technically no adjacency down in this row. You'll see there are arrows in between these cards, because when you place in the field, you also have to make sure you place leftmost, working your way to the right. So you can't just place another card over here, skipping another one. They have to be next to each other. But down in the river, it doesn't actually matter. Just play cards down into the river, that's fine. You're just playing a card down there to essentially not block up anything in the field since these have restrictions. So those would be the two places you could play your cards on the game board, because the third way to play a card is an ability card, but you get ability cards from the Eternals. Again, we'll go over to that once I talk about getting an Eternal and what happens with that. So let's just take a step back here, and let's say it is the beginning of the game. Let's put the blue cards back over here. And my green cards, I have a 1, 3, and a 4, and I'm going to be the starting player. So I pick any one of these 3 cards from my hand and play it into one of these 3 field rows or into the river. Let's say I decide to place my 1 into the mountain. That's my turn. I am done. I played a single card into the field. It's now the next player's turn, and we just go in clockwise order. So from the start of the game, you pick a starting player, and then it's clockwise the rest of the game. So green, yellow, red, then blue through the whole game. So once I'm done, I will draw back up to 3 cards. I currently have 2 in my hand, so I would only draw 1 card from my player deck back into my hand. If at any point I had 3 or more cards already in my hand, I wouldn't draw anymore, but I also wouldn't discard down. I would just have 3 or more cards. That can happen when you trigger ability cards or doing the other action, which will be passing cards, which I'll go over shortly. But in this case, I played a card, went down to 2, so I drew 1 back from my player deck to give my hand 3 cards again. If your player deck is ever empty and you need to draw, you simply just don't draw. So if I have 2 cards in my hand and I have nothing in my player deck, I just don't draw and I have a 2-card hand. Next turn I'd play another card, I'll have a 1-card hand. And then if I play again, I'll have no cards in my hand. And then when it comes back to my turn, if I'm supposed to play, that's when I wouldn't have an action, and that's how we would lose the game. So one thing you have to be mindful of is keeping track of how many cards all players have in their hands as well as in their player deck. So let's just put that back here. Again, I drew back up. I have my 3-card hand. It now comes over to the yellow player. They would have their 3 cards in hand. They have a 1, 2, 3. So maybe they want to play their single card here, the 2, to continue the mountain ascending order and having different colors and different numbers next to each other. So their turn's done, draw a card into their hand, and goes on to the next player. Red now looks at their hand, which is also a 1, 2, 3. So maybe they just want to keep things going along by placing the 3 there, drawing a card, ending their turn. Now we go to the blue player, and look at that, they have the 4. So maybe they want to go ahead and decide to finish this row. Now, whenever you play cards, and to play the last card in the row is by playing it directly to the left of the Eternals in that row. So in this case, the blue player has completed the top row. Whenever you do that, before drawing back up and ending your turn, that player gets to revive one of the 3 Eternals in that row. To revive an Eternal, you simply pick any one of the Eternals that's still left in that row to revive. You do not have to revive the leftmost one. You can pick any one of them that are available. So let's say the blue player decides to pick the mermaid. What you'll do is you'll take the entire 9-card stack of those Eternals. You'll take the Eternal itself, flip it over to its revived side, which is the colorful side, and you'll place it up in the revival area. You'll always put it in the leftmost empty space of the revival area. In this case, it's the first Eternal, so it's going to go in the left area. But in a future revive, there's already the mermaid there, so the next one would go to the right of it, and the next one will go here, so on and so forth, all the way down. But we've unlocked or revived the mermaid, and this again was the blue player. So all of this stuff is happening from the blue player. They're the one deciding, they're the one who is getting the new deck. Because they will then take those 8 mermaid cards, which were already shuffled during setup. So remember, you don't need to reshuffle it now, since you already did it before. And you will take those 8 cards and place it under any cards that are currently in your player deck. If you don't have a player deck, then they're just going to go straight into your player deck. That's fine. But in this case, the blue player does have the 2 blue cards from their player deck. So making sure they put the mermaid cards underneath, the blue cards on top, and then that becomes their player deck. Their turn would now be over. They would draw their card into their hand and have a 3-card hand. It would come over to the green player. But let's just focus a little bit more on the revival of Eternal and what all of this means. So as we saw, the blue player just gained 8 new cards. So first off, they have more cards to play with. Every other player still only has their 5 starting cards, but the blue player now has their starting cards plus all these cards from the mermaid. If you look in the bottom left-hand corner, it's going to show you the 8 cards that come in the mermaid's deck. So you can see at any time, if you look up here, you'll be able to know the blue player has a chance of drawing these cards. So when you're looking on the board and seeing, okay, maybe we need a 3 to go here, the mermaid doesn't have a 3. So if we're relying on a 3, we can't rely on the blue player having that. Again, ignoring their starting card that they have, but just off of the mermaid thing. The other thing is that 8th card in the bottom shows you, see if I can get a little bit closer, shows you that they have an ability. All Eternals, all these starting ones have ability cards. It's just that last 8th one. So it just shows you the icon of that Eternal to remind you it has an ability. The abilities themselves are all referenced on the ability aid card, and they will show you the icon on the ability itself. You'll know right away, let me just grab it out, what an ability card looks like. It'll look way different from the normal playing cards that you play to the board. Each ability card is different. I will go over those towards the end of the video, but just know that's one of the cards that will be in your 8-card deck. Next, the one thing we want to focus on is the curse of the Eternal that is now activated. When you revive an Eternal, you activate the curse on that Eternal. In the bottom right-hand corner, it shows you what that curse is. In this case with the mermaid, it's telling you whenever you play a card to the field, you cannot play a 4. And this applies to all players, not just the blue player who revived the Mermaid Eternal, all players on the board. You can no longer play 4s to the field. The important thing to know here is the river is never affected by any placement rules as well as the curse restrictions. You could still play a 4 into the river if you wanted to. It's specifically the field that you cannot play them. So now that we've gone over everything about the revival and what to worry about when you do revive an Eternal, let's finish up the blue player's turn and completing the board area. So the next thing you'll need to do is clear off all of the cards that were played into that row. So all of these cards will go into the discard area, which is in the bottom right-hand corner, and everything in the discard area is removed from the game. You will never see those cards for the rest of this play. Next, we need to slide over any Eternals on this row if a farther back Eternal was picked. So because we picked the Mermaid, there's a gap here. So the Phoenix needs to be picked up, and we need to slide it over so now these Eternals are touching each other. This is important because now to complete this row, it's going to take 5 cards instead of 4. So each time you revive an Eternal, it becomes harder to revive the next one in that row. So now we've completed another row, and the yellow player will get to revive an Eternal from this middle row. So again, they clear all these cards off, put them in the discard area, and pick one of these 3 Eternals. Let's say they decide to go with the skeleton. They put the skeleton card face up there. They take the 8 cards, which have already been shuffled, put them on underneath their player deck, which in this case, they don't have anything. So they just put it there, and then they would draw back up to 3 at the end of the turn, which would include drawing a skeleton card since they only have the 2 cards in hand. And then it would go to the red player. We'd slide these over first, and then it would go to the red player. Now, the other thing you can do on your turn is play ability cards. So if you have an ability card in your hand, depending on the type of ability card will determine where it goes. In stage A, all of the A Eternals will go up to this stage card area. So when you play an A Eternal ability, you simply play the card up into one of these 3 areas, and that's actually how you score one of the 4 points you need in the game. By the time you place your 3rd one, you place the card and you move the star over there. But the other Eternals, when you play their ability cards, so for example, if we grabbed the skeleton, this one will get played to the discard area. You'll trigger whatever the ability is, but it goes straight to the discard. But now that we've gone over all the ways to play cards, let's go over generating a jewel. So as we mentioned, there are curses that become active for these Eternals when you're playing into the field. Well, the way to remove these curses is by generating one of these 8 jewels and giving it to that Eternal. So just going from top to bottom, left to right, this one is playing any 2 cards, any 3 cards, 3 of the same color, 3 different colors, a 1 or a 9 on the card itself, specifically one of those numbers, any 2 of the same numbers, 3 of the same numbers, and a 1, 5, 9, specifically those 3 numbers in your hand. So if it was the blue player's turn and they had these 3 cards, a 1, 2, and 3 of blue, they would be able to do any 3 cards or 3 of the same color, or this 1/9 since they have the 1 here. Another thing to mention when generating a jewel, there must be a revived Eternal that does not have a jewel to place on. Additionally, ability cards can be used when generating jewels, but only for the any 2 cards or any 3 cards. You cannot use it for any of the others that require a specific color or number. When you generate a jewel, you'll use all of the cards, anywhere from 1 to 3, and place them in the river. So maybe they decide to do 3 of the same color. They will then take the jewel associated with the one they did and place it on any one of the revived Eternals that's available. In this case, there's only 3 to pick from, so they would do one of those. You never have to go left to right. You can pick whichever one you want. So maybe they want to cover up the skeleton because the 2s and 8s are bad for everybody, more so than the other ones. So now 2s and 8s can be played by any player because the skeleton's curse is now inactive. It's been blocked by that jewel. And now the 3 of the same color jewel can no longer be generated. It's already been done. You can't do it again. So there are 8 in total, and you can only do 8. The other thing to keep in mind is when you play these cards or use these cards to generate a jewel, they're going into the river, which means you do not have to worry about curses that are on there when generating the jewel. Because remember, cards that go into the river ignore all placement rules as well as curse restrictions. So if I can't play a 4, I could use a 4 in my recipe to still block any of those. Same with the 2s and 8s. I used a 2 in this recipe, which is fine because it's going into the river, not into the field. Curses only ever apply to the field, which is reminded on the Eternal card with the little field symbol. And whenever you generate the jewel for the 159 combo, not only will you get a jewel, but you'll also get a star, which again is one of the 4 points you need to win the game. So you'd put the star over there, and you would cover up one of the Eternals. And once you get a section of the 1st to 3rd or 4th to 6th Eternal, you'll score another point that way. So if you had 4 Eternals and you decided to do this Eternal, even though you have 3 Eternals with jewels on it, it's not specifically this section of Eternals. That's why it's touching and associated to this box of 3. So you would need to put it here to score that point. And then to get this point, you go with these 3. And while we're here, we may as well just go over the other 2 points. This one up here, when you complete all 9 Eternals, so just revive them, you do not have to have jewels on them, which again, there are only 8, so it wouldn't be possible. But just placing the 9th Eternal will get you this point. And the bottom point down here is completing that row 4 times. Every row in the field has a 4th lap bonus. When you complete the row, the first time you'll get an Eternal, second time you'll get an Eternal, third time you'll get an Eternal, and the 4th time you'll gain one of the 4th lap bonuses depending on the row that you are completing. And the 4th lap bonus for this middle row is to gain all spent hearts back. In the top row, you're going to get this camp card. When you gain this, you'll place it in one of the other 2 rows immediately. The second you get this bonus, you must place it. And wherever the cards are, so let's just say we've got that and this, and they place the camp here. For the rest of the row, this becomes camp as far as field card placement rules go. You ignore the cave and you start working on as camp. The other thing to point out, once you gain the 4th lap bonus from a row, you can no longer play cards into that row. So you'd flip the field card face down to show that, and all cards that were played in this row would stay. So all the cards that are in this row would just stay. You do not discard them when you get the 4th lap bonus. So this is a huge visual reminder that you can no longer play cards in this top row. Next, let's go over the rare cards. So as you can see, I did place a rare card up here in this top row, and then we do have the river rare bonuses down below. So the way you gain access to the rare cards down in the river bonus is by filling up the river. As you can see, there are 5 spaces to place cards into. Whenever there are 5 or more cards in the river, the player who's placed those last cards will clear the river and gain one of those river rare cards. So for example, if it was the green player's turn and they had these 2 5 cards, they would play them down to the river. They would be generating the jewel of 2 of the same number. They'd cover up the phoenix. And then they would be able to clear the field since there are 5 or more cards there. It doesn't matter if there's more. If you play 6 or 7 or 8, depending on how many end up getting in there, all of the cards clear. They go to the discard area, and that player gains a river rare card directly into their hand. It doesn't go to their player deck, it goes into their hand immediately. This helps them alleviate having to draw more cards from their deck. River rares are also double-sided, so you'll always know when a player has them in their hand. When playing a rare card, you can ignore the common placement and field card restrictions. So this rare card can just go there, doesn't matter, because it acts as any of the 5 colors or any of the 9 numbers. However, the one sort of weird thing with it is keep in mind the rare card ignores it, but all of the other cards that are played, if they're a number card, still has to follow the common and field card rules. So what I mean by that is the cave is still descending. So we've played an 8, then a 5, there's now a rare. So the next card that could be played would be a 3, because the rare card essentially is acting as a 4 in this case. If you wanted to play the next possible lowest, you could still play a 2 or a 1 if you wanted, because that still goes lower. But if you were to play a number card in this spot, it would essentially be a 4 as the next possible lowest number, because 4 would be descending from 5. So this rare can be treated as a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1 essentially. Now, rare cards can still be placed next to rare cards, though. So if I put another rare card here, that's fine. Again, it's acting as any color or of those numbers. The next card, if you count from there, would be 5, 4, 3, so this would have to be a 2 or a 1. Additionally, the extra special rule with the mountain and the cave, whenever there is a 1 or a 9, as you saw me do earlier, you can place as many rare cards after a 9 in the mountain row and after a 1 in the cave row. So even though they can only act as a 1 through 9, because they get to ignore the common placement rules, they get to ignore same numbers being next to each other. So this is technically acting as a 9, but it gets to ignore that common placement rule of 9s being next to 9s. So you can place as many as you want of them specifically with the mountain field card. And then the cave is 1s. So if you had a 1 here, normally this row wouldn't be able to be completed anymore because there's nothing lower than a 1. You would never play anything, but you could play rare cards to finish the row off. I also want to go over the 2 color cards. These will appear in the Sea Eternal decks, and these cards have 2 colors. When you play them to the field, you get to rotate it based on the orientation that you want because the colors that's on the side dictates which color is actually adjacent to something else. So in this case, yellow is on this side and blue is on this side. So the next card here can't be a blue because that would be adjacent to each other, but you could put a yellow there, that's still fine. Or they could have rotated it this way, so now yellow's facing out and blue's that way, so a blue could go there. Or of course, any of the other colors, red, green, or purple. Now, once a card is placed on the field, it can no longer be rotated. So the moment you play it, you must decide which way you want it to be, and then it has to stay like that for the rest of the time. And then lastly, just to go over, the 5th color does show up as purple. These will appear in the Be Eternal decks. This is just a 5th color that's included in the game. You don't start with them since the 4 starting colors are red, blue, yellow, and green, but you will introduce a 5th color throughout the game. This isn't a wild color, it's just a new 5th color that gets introduced to try and help make it a little bit easier based on the color combinations when the rows start to get longer. So now let's go over the ability cards. So as I mentioned, for Stage A and Stage A only, when you play an A Eternal ability card, it goes up to this card area. So the first one you play will go here, the second one you play goes there, the third one will go here, and you'll gain a point. So the first 2 don't really do anything, they're just getting you to place the third one to get that point. We already went over the skeleton. When you play the skeleton card, you put it into the discard area, and then you gain any spent heart back. The Ghost ability card allows all players to reveal the 3 cards that are in their hand, or more if you have more than 3 cards in your hand. So all players will reveal all of their cards until the end of that current turn. And players can at this point discuss out loud the information about those cards. So once you know that this player's got a 2 and that player's got a 3, maybe you'll say, okay, I'll play mine here, yours there. But once this player's turn is over, so once they put this card into the discard area, all revealed cards will go back into hand, and then it just goes to the next player's turn. The Witch ability card will be played to the discard area, and it allows you to generate any one of the jewels that has not already been generated, as long as it is not the 159. You can't generate the one that gives you a point for free. You can only do one of the other 7. And it is reminded on the ability card at the bottom, it tells you 159 with a little X next to it. The Kraken ability will let you take any 2 cards from the river area directly back into your hand. So as you can see, it shows a little river symbol. Again, this goes to the discard area. Grab 2 cards from the river and place them into your hand. Now, if there's only 1 card in the river, then you'd only take the 1 card. And if there's more than 2, you pick which of those cards you want to go back into your hand. The Medusa ability will allow you to take one of the river rare cards that has been discarded from the game, so put over into that area. After it's been given from the river bonus, it goes into the field, it gets cleared. The Medusa will allow you to play it back into the river bonus area, which essentially increases your game length based on the number of times you can complete the river before you draw the game over card. And lastly is the Berserker ability card, and this one will actually get played to the field. The way it works is you pick any 1 card that is in the field, and you place it over top of it and replace it with that card by taking this card into your hand. So you're essentially swapping the Berserker card with another card that's already on the field. And the Berserker card just acts as a rare for any of the purposes of explaining how the rares work. And all that information that I just went over on all the ability cards will be on the ability player aid, so you can always reference that as well. Now that we've gone over playing cards and generating jewels, let's talk about the third and final action you can take on your turn. And that is simply to give a card to your teammate. So all you have to do is take one of these 3 hearts, as long as it's on the left side, and slide it over to the right. You've now spent a heart, and you can take any one of the 3 cards that are in your hand and give it to another player. You'll do it face down so the other players don't see what you're giving to them, but they will of course be able to see the backs, and this is another important thing, is all players should be able to see your backs at all times to know which type of card you have. If you know I have one of my green starting cards and 2 Kraken cards, you can have an idea based on what the Kraken has, and then of course the green starting card, what would be in my hand. If I pass this card to somebody else, they know I'm passing that green starting card versus a Kraken card. But that's all giving a card to a teammate is. As you can see, we only have 3 hearts. Once you spend all 3, you can no longer take that action. As I mentioned with the skeleton ability, that actually gets a spent heart back. So you'd be able to complete a 4th pass action, or giving a card to a teammate. Otherwise, players will keep taking turns in clockwise order by taking one of the 3 actions, playing a card generating a jewel, or giving a card to a teammate, until you either collect 4 of the 6 stars and win, or lose by not being able to complete an action on your turn, or drawing the game over card from the river bonus area. The way you draw that game over card is when you complete the river, you draw a river bonus. So you take the river rare card into your hand. Once you take 3 of them, on the 4th time that you need to draw one, you instead draw the game over card and all players would lose. Now the last thing to go over are the communication discs. Each player has 2 communication discs that they will use throughout the game. The way these discs work are pretty willy-nilly. If you've ever played the game Concept or Magic Maze, you'll be familiar with how these work. But if not, essentially, you get to use these at any time. There's no waiting for your turn. There's no limitation. There's no number of uses. It's not like once you place it, you then have to wait until another turn. It's literally use them as openly and as willingly as you want to use them throughout the entire game. And what these are doing is allowing you to indirectly communicate the information about what is in your hand. Those 3 cards that you can't show to other players, you can give them information based on using these discs. So if the green player had a low number in their hand, maybe a 1 or a 2, they could put their disc here to show that they could play into that row. So let's just say it's still earlier in the game. There's still some internals to be unlocked. They could put this here, which lets players know they've got a low number in their hand. They could also put it over here because that would be low down in that end. You can also place both of your discs in the same spot to really show that you want to play a card there, or maybe it's your only card you can play, so you really want to go there. You can slam it down to show that as well. These are also just communications. It's important to know that this doesn't mean green is blocking or reserving this space to play cards. Someone else can still go and play a card there. It's just everybody knows that green really wants to go there. And again, you can use these as openly as you want. So they could put their 2 discs here and maybe be like, okay, you guys see that? You know that? Okay, good. I'm going to also now move my disc over here to show I could play there. And maybe I could also play there. Maybe I want to play down to the river, or I could do that jewel. I could generate any 3 cards, or this curse is a problem for me. Whatever you want, there is pretty much a meta up to the players on how you decide these communication discs could work for you, but you still have to limit it to placing it on the board and only using your color and placing them how you want. Now, everything you've learned here is all for the basics of how Eternal Decks works, as well as how to play Stage A on beginner mode. If you want to play Stage A on one of the harder difficulties or any one of the other stages, please watch those videos on how to do that. But one little sneak peek here, as far as Stage A goes, you'll start including new field cards to replace the camp one down at the bottom. That is one way that the game will make it a little bit harder, is by increasing the difficulty of the field card limitations in the bottom row. Otherwise, that's everything you need to know to play Eternal Decks. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Thanks so much for watching.